The battle for power, money, and truth begins in the most unexpected place, a courtroom. When billionaire Richard Carter is declared dead, his fortune should have gone to his twin sons, Michael and Daniel. But when the will mysteriously disappears and a woman claiming to be their sister steps forward, the inheritance turns into a bitter legal war. Then, the first shocking twist drops: Michael and Daniel aren't even twins. As secrets unravel, they uncover something far bigger than a family dispute: a hidden fortune, a fake death, a missing father, and an unstoppable organization that will do anything to bury the truth. As the Carters dig deeper, they realize they aren't just fighting for an inheritance anymore, they're fighting to stay alive. Where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. Like the video if you love a good mystery. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single twist. The courtroom was packed. Reporters jostled for space, cameras flashed, and spectators murmured excitedly. The Carter twins, Michael and Daniel, stood on opposite sides of the aisle, their expressions stone cold. "Order in the court," Judge Leonard Barker commanded, slamming his gavel. "We are here to settle the matter of Richard Carter's estate." Michael, the elder by 2 minutes, spoke first. "Your Honor, my father intended for his fortune to remain within our family. The fact that his will is missing is highly suspicious." Daniel scoffed. "Perhaps you were the one who made it disappear, brother." Their father's attorney, Jacob Sterling, cleared his throat. "If I may, Your Honor, the original will be kept in a secured safe, but when I went to retrieve it, the safe was empty." Gasps echoed across the court. The judge frowned. "Are you saying the will was stolen?" "It appears so," Sterling admitted. The court erupted into whispers. The judge banged his gavel again. "If the will is missing, we must rely on secondary evidence and testimonies." Then the doors swung open. A tall woman with striking blue eyes walked in, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She moved with the confidence of someone who had a secret no one else knew. "My name is Olivia Carter," she announced, "and I am Richard Carter's daughter." The courtroom fell silent. Michael and Daniel turned to stare at her, disbelief flashing in their eyes. "This is absurd," Daniel exclaimed. "We don't have a sister." Judge Barker sighed. "Miss Carter, do you have proof of your claim?" Olivia reached into her purse and handed a stack of documents to the bailiff. "These are paternity test results. They prove that Richard Carter was my father." Michael grabbed the papers, his eyes scanning the results. "This can't be possible," he muttered. "DNA doesn't lie," Olivia said, crossing her arms. The courtroom burst into chaos. Reporters whispered excitedly, and the judge had to slam his gavel multiple times. "Enough! We will verify these results before proceeding." As if the situation wasn't complicated enough, another shock followed. One of the attorneys, a junior associate, whispered something to Jacob Sterling, who immediately paled. He cleared his throat. "Your Honor, new information has come to my attention." "What now?" the judge groaned. Sterling hesitated, then spoke. "An offshore bank account under Richard Carter's name has just been discovered, containing over $100 million. The air in the courtroom thickened. The Carter family had been wealthy, but this secret fortune changed everything. Daniel turned to Michael. "Dad never told us about this." "Why?" Michael clenched his fists. "Because he didn't trust us." "Perhaps," Olivia cut in, "because he didn't plan to leave it to either of you." A tense silence followed. Judge Barker sighed. "This case just got more complicated. Court is adjourned until we verify all claims. We reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp." As people filed out of the courtroom, Michael and Daniel exchanged a wary glance. The battle had just begun, and they were already drowning in secrets. Little did they know, the real storm was yet to come. The next morning, the courtroom was filled with an even larger crowd. Word of Olivia Carter's shocking claim and the discovery of Richard Carter's secret offshore fortune had spread like wildfire. Reporters lined the halls, eager for another dramatic revelation. Michael and Daniel sat at opposite ends of the courtroom, avoiding each other's gaze. They were still trying to process the idea that they might have a sister and that their father had kept $100 million account hidden from them. Judge Barker entered, adjusting his glasses as he took his seat. Court is now in session. We will begin with the verification of the paternity results submitted by Miss Olivia Carter. The courtroom held its breath as a forensic expert took the stand. The judge nodded at him. You have analyzed the DNA results presented yesterday? Yes, Your Honor. The expert cleared his throat. After a thorough review, I can confirm that Olivia Carter is indeed the biological daughter of Richard Carter. Gasps rippled through the court. Michael clenched his jaw, while Daniel shook his head in disbelief. This is insane, Daniel muttered under his breath. Judge Barker raised a hand. Silence. The court acknowledges Olivia Carter's claim as a legitimate heir to Richard Carter's estate. Olivia's lips curled into a small, victorious smile, but before she could say anything, the forensic expert continued. However, he said, flipping through his report, we also conducted DNA tests on Michael and Daniel Carter. Michael frowned. Why? It's standard procedure in cases involving disputed inheritance. The expert adjusted his glasses, and what we discovered is unexpected. The courtroom grew so silent that the ticking of the courtroom clock became deafening. The expert exhaled. Michael and Daniel Carter are not biological twins. A stunned pause. Then what? Michael shot up from his chair. Judge Barker banged his gavel. Sit down, Mr. Carter. Daniel turned to the expert, his voice tight. There has to be a mistake. We were born on the same day. We've been told our whole lives that we're twins. The expert shook his head. There is no mistake. Michael Carter is biologically related to Richard Carter, but Daniel Carter is not. The courtroom exploded with whispers and shocked murmurs. Michael turned to his brother, his voice unsteady. Daniel, if you're not Dad's son, then whose son are you? Daniel's face darkened, his hands tightening into fists. I don't know. Judge Barker let the chaos settle before addressing Jacob Sterling. Mr. Sterling, does this change the inheritance case? Sterling hesitated. If Daniel Carter is not biologically Richard Carter's son, then technically he has no legal claim to the estate unless a provision was made for him in the missing will. Daniel shot up from his seat. That's ridiculous. Richard Carter raised me. I was his son in every way that matters. I understand your frustration, Mr. Carter, Judge Barker said, rubbing his temples, but the law recognizes biological heirs unless otherwise stated in the will. Michael, still reeling, turned to Olivia. You knew about this, didn't you? Olivia raised an eyebrow. Believe me, I was just as surprised as you. But if Daniel isn't Dad's son, then why did he raise him as one? It was a question no one in the court had an answer to. Judge Barker sighed heavily. This case is growing more complicated by the minute. We need to find that missing will. He turned to Sterling. Have any leads surfaced regarding its whereabouts? Sterling hesitated before nodding. Actually, there is something. We discovered that the safe where the will was kept was accessed the night before Richard Carter was declared dead. A chill ran through the courtroom. Michael narrowed his eyes. Who accessed it? Sterling adjusted his tie. We don't know. The security footage from that night was deleted. Judge Barker let out a long breath. Then we need to find out who deleted it. Until further evidence is provided, this court is adjourned. The gavel came down, but no one moved. Because for the first time, the case wasn't just about inheritance. It was about a missing will, a stolen identity, and a father who may have had secrets that no one, perhaps not even Michael, Daniel, or Olivia, was ready to face. The courtroom doors had barely closed before the chaos spilled into the hallways. Reporters fired off urgent updates, headlines flashing across news tickers. Carter family in courtroom scandal. Secret sister and DNA shocker. Michael and Daniel walked in tense silence, their minds spinning. The revelation that they weren't twins had left them shaken, but the missing will and the erased security footage suggested something even darker. Someone had been trying to hide the truth long before their father died. Olivia caught up to them, her heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floor. "So," she said, smirking, "which one of you deleted the footage?" Michael scowled. "You think one of us did it?" Olivia shrugged. "You're both acting pretty defensive." Daniel turned to her, his jaw clenched. "You just dropped into our lives out of nowhere and expect us to trust you?" "I don't expect anything," Olivia said coolly. "But I do expect answers." Michael exhaled, rubbing his temples. "If we want answers, we need to figure out who had access to that footage." Just then, Jacob Sterling hurried toward them, his face pale. "We have a bigger problem," he said. "Come with me." They followed him into a small, private office near the courtroom. Sterling locked the door behind them before turning to face the three siblings. "I just received word from one of our private investigators," he said, voice low. "Someone spotted Richard Carter in Mexico last week." Silence. Michael blinked. "You mean someone who looks like him?" "No," Sterling said gravely. "Someone who is him." Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're telling us our father, who had a state funeral, is alive?" Sterling placed a file on the desk and flipped it open. Inside was a grainy photo of a man sitting at an outdoor cafe in Cancun. His face was partially hidden behind a newspaper, but there was no mistaking the familiar sharp jawline, the signature silver watch on his wrist. It was Richard Carter. Michael staggered back. "No, that's not possible." "I thought the same thing," Sterling admitted, "until I checked his death certificate." "What about it?" Olivia asked, arms crossed. Sterling hesitated. "It was signed by a private doctor. No autopsy was ever performed." Daniel swore under his breath. "This has to be a joke." "It's not," Sterling said. "Which means everything we thought we knew about his death might be a lie." Michael shook his head. Why would he fake his own death? He had everything: power, money, control. Olivia narrowed her eyes. Unless someone was trying to take it away from him. A heavy silence fell over the room. If Richard had staged his own death, it meant he had been running from something or someone. Michael exhaled sharply. "If he's alive, we need to find him." Daniel scoffed. "And what? Ask him why he abandoned us? Why he let us tear each other apart in court?" Sterling closed the file. "We're still gathering information, but if Richard Carter is alive, he may hold the key to everything: why the will is missing, why the footage was deleted, and why Daniel isn't his son." Daniel stiffened, but said nothing. Michael glanced at Olivia. "You came here looking for a share of the inheritance. What happens if there's no inheritance to claim?" Olivia smirked. "Then I want something better. The truth." A knock at the door interrupted them. A young associate peeked in, looking nervous. "Mr. Sterling, I just received a message from an anonymous source. They want to meet." Sterling frowned. "Meet where?" The associate swallowed. "At the courthouse. Midnight. They say they have information on Richard Carter." Another silence. Michael's heartbeat quickened. This was either their biggest lead or a trap. "Staying sight." "All right. We'll go." Olivia grinned. Now things are getting interesting. The courthouse was eerily quiet at midnight. The once crowded halls, filled with reporters and legal teams, were now deserted. Dim emergency lights cast long shadows across the marble floors, making the grand building feel more like a mausoleum than a place of justice. Michael, Daniel, and Olivia stood near the main entrance, their eyes scanning the empty space. Jacob Sterling checked his watch. They said they'd be here at midnight sharp. Daniel crossed his arms. "Or maybe we're just walking into a setup." Michael exhaled, his breath visible in the cold night air. We don't have a choice. If someone knows the truth about Dad, we need to hear it. A distant echo of footsteps made them all turn. A figure emerged from the shadows near the judge's chambers, dressed in a dark coat and a baseball cap. The person hesitated before stepping into the light. It was a woman. She pulled down her hood, revealing sharp features and piercing green eyes. "You're the Carter heirs?" Michael stepped forward. "Who are you?" The woman glanced around nervously. "My name is Valerie King. I used to work for your father." Olivia frowned. "Used to?" Valerie's expression darkened. "Until I found out things I wasn't supposed to." Sterling raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly did you find out?" Valerie pulled a USB drive from her pocket and held it up. "This contains the deleted security footage from the night before Richard Carter's death." Michael's stomach tightened. "You have it?" Valerie nodded. "Your father didn't die that night. He left on his own. And someone helped him." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "Who?" She hesitated. "I don't know exactly, but I have proof that someone accessed the safe where the will was kept just before the footage was erased." Sterling took a step closer. "And why are you bringing this to us now?" Valerie exhaled, her hands trembling slightly. "Because I made a mistake. I trusted someone who told me to stay quiet. But now I know they've been covering something up." Olivia reached for the USB. "Then let's see it." But before Valerie could hand it over, a sharp sound echoed through the courthouse. A loud bang. The sound of a gunshot. Valerie gasped, her eyes widening in shock. A red stain spread across her coat as she staggered backward, collapsing against the marble floor. "Valerie!" Michael shouted, rushing to her side. Daniel spun around, searching for the shooter, but the halls were empty. Whoever had fired the shot had already disappeared. Sterling crouched next to Valerie, pressing his hand against her wound. "Stay with us," Valerie gasped, gripping Michael's wrist. With her last bit of strength, she shoved the USB drive into his palm. "Find the truth." Then her body went limp. The courthouse fell silent again, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. Michael stared at the blood on his hands, his pulse pounding. Olivia knelt beside him, her face unreadable. She died protecting this. Daniel clenched his fists. Whoever did this just proved that we're getting close to something dangerous. Sterling took a shaky breath. "We need to get out of here before someone comes back to finish the job." Michael gripped the USB tightly. It was the only clue they had now, the only thing that could finally expose the truth about their father, the missing will, and the person willing to kill to keep it all buried. As they hurried out of the courthouse, one thought burned in Michael's mind. If Richard Carter was still alive, someone wanted to make sure he never came back. The Carter siblings and Jacob Sterling sat in a dimly lit office, tension thick in the air. They had retreated to Sterling's law firm after fleeing the courthouse, still shaken by Valerie King's murder. The USB she had given them lay on the table like a ticking time bomb. Michael's hands trembled as he inserted the drive into a laptop. The screen flickered, loading a single video file labeled Carter Safe Room, Last Access. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, clicking play. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. It showed Richard Carter's private office inside his mansion. The timestamp in the corner read 11:42 p.m., the night before his supposed death. They watched in silence as Richard himself entered the frame. Michael's breath caught in his throat. "It's really him." Richard looked calm, but tense. He moved to the large steel safe in the corner and began entering a code. A moment later, the safe door swung open, revealing stacks of documents, likely legal papers, financial records, and most importantly, his will. Then came the real shock. A second figure entered the frame. A tall man in a dark suit. His face was partially obscured by shadows, but his presence was unmistakable. Michael's grip on the table tightened. "Who the hell is that?" The man stepped closer to Richard, speaking in hushed tones. The security footage had no audio, but Richard's reaction said everything. His face hardened. He shook his head firmly. Then, suddenly, the stranger pulled something from his pocket. A syringe. Daniel swore under his breath. What the on the screen? Richard barely had time to react before the needle was plunged into his neck. He staggered, clutching at his throat, his movements growing sluggish. Within seconds, he collapsed onto the desk, unmoving. Michael's stomach churned. He was drugged. The man in the video calmly reached into the safe, retrieving several documents, including what looked like the missing will. Then he closed the safe, wiped the desk clean, and exited the room. The video ended. A heavy silence followed. Daniel was the first to speak, his voice cold. That wasn't a robbery. That was an extraction. That guy knew exactly what he was doing. Olivia leaned forward. Whoever he is, he didn't kill Richard. He incapacitated him and took the will. Sterling ran a hand through his hair, which means Richard wasn't dead when this happened. Michael shut the laptop, his mind racing. We need to find out who that man is. He's the key to everything. Daniel exhaled sharply. The security footage from the safe room was deleted. Valerie must have recovered this copy before someone could destroy it completely. He hesitated before adding, and they killed her for it. Olivia drummed her fingers against the table. Who would benefit from stealing the will? Who gains the most if it never surfaces? Sterling looked grim. It could be anyone connected to Richard's business empire. A rival, a partner, or even someone in the family. Michael's jaw tightened. There's only one way to find out. He rewound the video. Pausing at the moment, the mysterious man turned slightly toward the camera. Though his face was partially obscured, one detail stood out: a gold lapel pin on his suit jacket. Michael zoomed in. The pin bore a symbol, a crest. Sterling inhaled sharply. That insignia belongs to an exclusive private security firm. It's known for working with high-profile clients, billionaires, politicians, corporate elites. Olivia's eyes narrowed. So you're saying someone hired professionals to make Richard disappear? Sterling nodded slowly. That's exactly what I'm saying. Daniel leaned back, rubbing his temples. So now we have a stolen will, a fake death, a secret offshore account, and an assassin in a tailored suit. Just another normal day in the Carter family. Michael ignored his sarcasm. We need to trace that pin back to its owner. If we find him, we find out who he was working for. Olivia smirked. And if Richard Carter is still alive, maybe we finally find out why he vanished. Michael's pulse quickened. This wasn't just about an inheritance anymore. This was about uncovering the truth before someone else decided to silence them like they did Valerie. Time was running out, and they had no idea who they could trust. The next morning, Michael, Daniel, Olivia, and Jacob Sterling gathered in a private office at Sterling's law firm. The tension in the room was thick. The video on the USB had given them their first real lead: a mysterious man with a gold lapel pin, linked to an elite private security firm. Whoever he was, he had drugged Richard Carter, stolen the will, and vanished without a trace. Michael leaned against the desk, arms crossed. So how do we track him down? Sterling sighed, rubbing his temples. That insignia belongs to Sentinel Global Security, one of the most discreet and expensive private protection agencies in the country. They only take on high-profile clients. The fact that one of their operatives was in Richard Carter's office that night means someone powerful was pulling the strings. Daniel scoffed. Great. So we're up against trained mercenaries now. Olivia smirked. At least it's more exciting than a courtroom battle. Michael shot her a look before turning back to Sterling. Can you get us a list of their employees? Sterling hesitated. Not legally. Daniel leaned forward. And illegally? Sterling exhaled. I might have a contact who can help. Michael nodded. Then call them. Sterling hesitated for a beat before pulling out his phone. The room fell silent as he dialed. After a few rings, a low, gravelly voice answered. What do you want, Sterling? I need a name, Sterling said, his voice steady. A Sentinel Global agent who was active in New York around the time of Richard Carter's disappearance. The man on the other end chuckled. You think I keep those kinds of records? I think you owe me a favor, Sterling shot back. A pause. Then the man sighed. Fine. I'll check what I can. Give me an hour. The call ended, and Sterling put down the phone. Now we wait. Sterling's phone buzzed. He picked it up, listened for a moment, then nodded. Got it. He hung up and looked at the others. His name is Elliot Sloan, former military, highly trained, and specializes in strategic extractions. If he was involved, then Richard wasn't just taken, he was relocated. Michael frowned. Where is he now? Sterling's expression darkened. He owns a private security office in Manhattan, but getting him to talk won't be easy. He doesn't exactly cooperate with civilians. Olivia smirked. Lucky for us, we're not just civilians. The Carter siblings stood outside a sleek glass building in downtown Manhattan. The name Sloan Tactical Solutions was displayed on the front. Michael adjusted his jacket. We go in, get him talking, and figure out what he knows about our father. Daniel cracked his knuckles. Or we make him talk. Sterling sighed. Let's try the legal approach first, shall we? They stepped inside. The lobby was minimalist black leather chairs, modern artwork, and a single receptionist who barely glanced up. Michael approached the desk. We're here to see Elliot Sloan. The receptionist gave him a blank look. Do you have an appointment? No, Michael said, but we have something more important. She exhaled, then picked up the phone. A few hushed words later, she nodded. Mr. Sloan will see you. Elliot Sloan was exactly what they expected, mid-40s, tall, and built like someone who had spent his life in combat. He sat behind a steel desk, his sharp blue eyes watching them closely. I don't usually take walk-ins, he said. His voice was calm, controlled. But something tells me you won't leave until you get what you want. Michael took a step forward. We know you were at Richard Carter's mansion the night before he disappeared. Sloan raised an eyebrow. Do you? Michael placed the USB drive on the desk. We have proof. Security footage. We know you drugged him and took the will. Sloan's expression didn't change. He leaned back, clasping his hands together. And what do you want me to say? Daniel's patience snapped. How about why? Why did you take him? Who hired you? Sloan sighed. You're asking the wrong questions. Olivia crossed her arms. Enlighten us then. Sloan studied them for a moment, then exhaled. I wasn't hired to kill Richard Carter. I was hired to protect him. Michael froze. What? Sloan nodded. Your father wasn't running from you. He was running from someone much worse. The room fell silent. Daniel clenched his jaw. Who? Sloan's eyes darkened. You don't want to know? Michael's pulse pounded. Oh, we do. Sloan hesitated, then leaned in. Let's just say whoever took the will wasn't after money. They were after silence. Michael's stomach turned. If what Sloan was saying was true, then their father wasn't just missing, he was in hiding. And the people after him weren't going to stop until they made sure the truth never came out. Michael, Daniel, and Olivia sat frozen, processing Elliot Sloan's words. Their father wasn't just missing, he was in hiding. And the people after him weren't interested in money. They wanted silence. Michael leaned forward, his voice tight. Who was after him, Sloan? Sloan exhaled slowly, rubbing his jaw. I shouldn't even be talking to you. The people involved in this, they don't leave loose ends. Daniel scoffed. You think we're just going to walk away? Our father's out there, and someone tried to erase him. We're not leaving until you tell us who. Sloan studied them, then smirked slightly. You've got your father's stubbornness, I'll give you that. He reached into his desk drawer, pulling out a locked file. He hesitated for a second before sliding it across the desk. Read this, he said. Then tell me if you still want answers. Michael opened the file. Inside were surveillance photos, bank records, and one name that made his stomach drop. Vanguard Holdings. Sterling, who had been silent until now, inhaled sharply. "Oh, how?" Michael frowned. "What?" Sterling looked at Sloane. "Tell me this isn't what I think it is." Sloane gave a slow nod. "It is." Olivia tapped the file. "Can someone explain why this company is terrifying everyone in the room?" Sterling turned to the Carter siblings, his expression grim. "Vanguard Holdings is a multinational corporation with no public face. No official CEO. No shareholder meetings. Just an empire of businesses that quietly control industries from pharmaceuticals to private military contracts. Every major lawsuit against them has either disappeared or ended in sudden settlements. People who dig too deep into their operations tend to vanish." Michael's blood ran cold. "And our father was involved with them?" Sloane nodded. "Years ago, Richard Carter made a deal with Vanguard. He invested heavily into one of their biotech projects, something big, something dangerous. But when he realized what they were actually doing, he wanted out." Daniel's jaw clenched. "And they didn't let him." Sloane's expression darkened. "No one walks away from Vanguard." Michael felt a wave of unease. "So they came after him." Sloane gestured to the surveillance photos in the file. "Your father knew they'd come eventually. That's why he hired me not to take him out, but to get him out. That night, I injected him with a paralytic, just enough to make it look like he was dead. Then, I smuggled him out before Vanguard's people arrived." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "Then why take the will?" Sloane shrugged. "Orders. Your father wanted it gone. He knew if Vanguard got their hands on it, they'd use his fortune to cover up their tracks. He didn't want them touching a cent of his money." Olivia's fingers drummed against the desk. "Where is he now?" Sloane hesitated. "I don't know. I only handled the extraction. After that, he had a plan to disappear." Michael's hands clenched. "So what now?" "We just hope he reaches out to us." Sloane studied them. "There might be a way to draw him out." Sterling frowned. "How?" Sloane smirked. "By making Vanguard think you have something they want." A tense silence filled the room. Daniel leaned back. "You want us to bait a shadow organization that erases people?" Sloane shrugged. "Your father was important to them. If they think you have his records proof of whatever he was trying to expose, they'll come looking." Olivia grinned. "Sounds fun." Michael exhaled. "It sounds insane." Daniel smirked. "Then it's a Carter family tradition." Sloane leaned forward. "If we do this, there's no turning back." Michael met his gaze. "We're already in too deep." Sloane grinned. "Then let's start a war." The plan was reckless, dangerous, possibly suicidal. But it was the only way to force Vanguard Holdings out of the shadows. Michael, Daniel, Olivia, and Jacob Sterling sat inside Sloane's tactical office, reviewing the strategy. On the table, a burner laptop displayed fake documents, fabricated financial records, secret biotech reports, and emails implicating Vanguard in illegal dealings. Sloane tapped the screen. "This is what we're going to make them believe you have." Michael frowned. "And when they come for us?" Sloane smirked. "That's when we'll be ready." Daniel leaned forward. "How do we make sure they take the bait?" Sloane pulled up an encrypted email client. "We leak a rumor, a carefully placed message on dark web channels. Something that makes it look like Richard Carter left behind evidence of Vanguard's real operations. Something so big they won't ignore it." Sterling adjusted his glasses. "And you think they'll just show up at our doorstep?" Sloane shook his head. "No. They'll watch first. Vanguard doesn't make moves without gathering intel. They'll track you, tap your phones, wait to see if you're bluffing." Michael exhaled sharply. "So we make it look real." Sloane nodded. "Exactly. And when they come, we follow them, back to their source." Olivia smirked. "We lure them in, and then we flip the game." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "We better not screw this up." Sloane's expression hardened. "Screw this up, and we don't get a second chance." It started small. A single anonymous post on a dark web forum. Richard Carter didn't take his secrets to the grave. The files exist. Proof of Vanguard's classified operations. If you know where to look, you'll find them. No details. No names. Just enough to cause a ripple. Within an hour, the post had been viewed over 10,000 times. Within 2, it had been taken down, wiped clean. But the damage was done. The right people had seen it. Michael's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Where did you get this information? He showed the screen to Sloan. Sloan grinned. That didn't take long. Michael typed back. Prove you're worth talking to. The response came instantly. Meet us at Court Plaza Hotel. Rooftop. Midnight. Daniel raised an eyebrow. They're not wasting time. Olivia leaned back. Neither are we. The rooftop of the Court Plaza Hotel was deserted, the city lights stretching endlessly in all directions. Michael, Daniel, and Olivia stood under the neon glow of a rooftop sign, their breath visible in the cold night air. Sterling had protested coming, but Sloan insisted they needed to be there. We don't fight this war from a distance, he had said. We look them in the eyes. A soft click broke the silence. A figure emerged from the shadows. A woman, dressed in a sleek black coat, blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, her every movement calculated. She wasn't alone. 2 men flanked her, silent and unreadable. She stopped a few feet away, hands in her pockets. You're either very brave or very stupid. Michael forced a smile. We've been called worse. The woman tilted her head. I assume you're the Carter siblings. Daniel crossed his arms. And you are? She smiled, but it never reached her eyes. Let's keep it simple. You have something we want. We have something you want. Olivia smirked. Oh? And what's that? The woman's expression didn't change. Richard Carter. Silence. Michael's heart slammed against his ribs. You're lying. She pulled a phone from her coat and pressed a button. The screen lit up grainy surveillance footage. A man, tied to a chair. Weak but alive. Richard Carter. Michael's breath caught. Daniel's fists clenched. Olivia's smirk vanished. The woman slid the phone back into her pocket. You want your father? Give us the files. Sloane's voice cut through the tension. You and I both know those files don't exist. The woman finally looked at him, as if acknowledging his presence for the first time. Then I suggest you start making them exist. Michael's hands balled into fists. How do we know he's still alive? She smiled. You don't. The rooftop air felt suffocating. Daniel stepped forward. Where is he? The woman shrugged. That depends on how cooperative you are. Olivia exhaled. So let me get this straight. You kidnapped our father, covered up his death, and now you want us to trade fake evidence for a man you won't even confirm is alive. The woman's eyes gleamed. Yes. Michael's mind raced. Vanguard wasn't here to negotiate. They were here to control. And if they thought the Carters were bluffing, their father would never come home. Sloan spoke again, his voice low. We need time. The woman smiled thinly. You have 48 hours. Then, just as swiftly as they had arrived, she and her men disappeared into the night. Michael exhaled shakily. What the hell do we do now? Daniel clenched his jaw. We fight back. Sloane's expression darkened. Then we better move fast. Because now the clock was ticking. The moment the Vanguard operative disappeared into the night, Michael, Daniel, Olivia, and Sloan hurried back to their base at Sterling's law firm. The tension was suffocating. 48 hours. That was all the time they had to figure out how to outmaneuver an organization that erased people for a living. Michael paced the room. We need a plan. Fast. Daniel clenched his fists. I say we go in, find where they're keeping Dad, and get him out by force. Sloan shot him a look. That would be suicide. Olivia crossed her arms. So what do we do? Hand them fake files, and pray they don't kill him anyway. Sterling rubbed his temples. No, but we do have to give them something to chase. Michael stopped pacing. A diversion. Sterling nodded. If they think you're leading them to real evidence, they'll shift resources. And while they're distracted, we find Richard. Sloane leaned forward. And how do we make them believe we have something real? Olivia smirked. We give them breadcrumbs. Just enough to keep them hungry. By morning, the Carter name was making waves in the financial world. An anonymous leak sent shockwaves through Wall Street whispers that Richard Carter had hidden assets linked to classified biotech experiments. The message was vague but tantalizing enough to set off alarms. As expected, Vanguard reacted immediately. Within hours, Michael received a new text from an unknown number. You're playing a dangerous game. Where are the files? Michael smirked and typed back. Meet us in court. Let's settle this legally. Sloane chuckled. Nice. Call them out publicly. Daniel folded his arms. Now they have to make a move. The team planted false trails across the city. A fake safe deposit box registered under Richard Carter's name. A leaked document showing offshore transfers linked to Vanguard. A private court motion claiming ownership of a hidden biotech patent. The bait was set. By noon, surveillance confirmed Vanguard operatives were on the move tracking the false leads, hacking into financial servers, and trying to scrub any traces of their involvement. That's when Sloane made his move. While Vanguard chased ghosts, Sloane followed the only real clue. They had the video footage of Richard being held captive. We need to track where that video was taken, Sloane said, pulling up the grainy footage. Sterling studied the background. Look at the lighting. That flickering bulb. New York industrial zones. Still use those models. That narrows it down. Michael frowned. And the metal chair he's tied to, it looks rusted. Olivia leaned closer. And that sound in the background. Hear it? A distant horn, maybe a freight train. Sloane grinned. Good catch. He typed rapidly into a database, cross-referencing known industrial warehouses near active train lines. A moment later, the screen displayed a match. Hudson Freight Storage Facility. Abandoned since 2019. Limited security. Large underground holding areas. Michael's pulse quickened. That's it. That's where they have him. Sloane nodded. Then we move. Tonight. By midnight, the team was in position. Dressed in dark tactical gear, they crouched behind stacks of rusted shipping containers near the Hudson Freight Storage Facility. Sloane had arranged for a security breach, a silent power cut to disable alarms and cameras. Michael whispered, "No turning back now." Daniel smirked. "Wouldn't dream of it." Sloane gave the signal. "Go!" The team moved swiftly, navigating the shadows, avoiding roaming guards. They slipped inside the warehouse, heartbeats pounding in sync. Then Michael spotted him. Across the room, tied to a chair in the dim light, was Richard Carter. Bruised, weak, but alive. Michael's breath caught. "Dad!" But before they could move, a voice echoed from the darkness. "Leaving so soon?" The lights flickered on, revealing 6 armed men blocking every exit. And standing in the center was the blonde woman from Vanguard. She smiled coldly. "You really thought you could outplay us?" Michael's stomach dropped. They had walked straight into a trap. The air inside the Hudson Freight Storage Facility felt thick with tension. 6 men, all dressed in dark suits, stood at key exit points, their postures stiff with authority. In the center, the blonde woman from Vanguard Holdings studied Michael, Daniel, Olivia, and Sloane with a knowing smirk. Across the dimly lit room, Richard Carter sat tied to a chair, his movements sluggish, but his eyes sharp. Michael's fists clenched. "We're taking our father with us." The woman tilted her head, amusement flashing across her face. "Are you now?" Daniel stepped forward, his stance tense. "We're not leaving without him." She exhaled. "You always had your father's stubbornness. But this isn't about him anymore. This is about what he took." With a flick of her hand, one of her men tossed a tablet onto the floor. The screen lit up, showing a vault with a locked briefcase inside. A countdown appeared in the corner. 00:29:57. Michael's pulse quickened. What is this? The woman's voice was smooth. A decision. She pointed to the image. That vault contains records your father kept. Information that could impact very powerful people. Sterling inhaled sharply. And you need us to retrieve it. The woman smirked. You're quick. Yes. Either you bring us what's in that vault, or you never see your father again. 00:27:42. Daniel gritted his teeth. And if we don't cooperate? The woman's gaze hardened. Then this situation becomes irreversible. Michael's mind raced. They had less than 30 minutes. Then, unexpectedly, Richard let out a quiet chuckle. The woman's smirk faded. Something funny? Richard lifted his head. You always overestimate control. Michael's breath caught. Was his father bluffing? Richard turned to her. You think that vault is the only thing tying me to you? That I didn't prepare for this exact situation? The woman's eyes narrowed. You're lying. Richard smirked. Am I? Then why do you look uncertain? The room felt heavier. Even the suited men exchanged brief glances. Richard continued. If something happens to me, the real files won't stay hidden. The woman's fingers twitched. She was weighing options. If she was wrong, everything could be exposed. Then her phone rang. She hesitated, then answered. A muffled voice spoke rapidly on the other end. Her face changed sharp, irritated. Michael took a step closer. What's wrong? She snapped the phone shut and turned to her team. We're leaving. Daniel blinked. What? The woman scowled. This conversation is over. She locked eyes with Richard. But don't think this ends here. Then, as swiftly as they had arrived, they were gone. The Carter siblings stood frozen. Michael turned to his father. Dad, what just happened? Richard exhaled, his body sagging. I played the only move I had left. Michael untied him. Are the files really out there? Richard smiled weakly. That's for them to keep wondering. Sterling adjusted his glasses. So they backed off because they think something bigger is in play? Richard nodded. And as long as they think that, we're safe. Daniel exhaled. So we made it through? Richard gave a tired laugh. Surviving isn't winning. But for now, it's enough. Michael helped him up. Then let's go home. As they stepped into the cold night air, Olivia smirked. Not bad for a couple of rich kids caught in a corporate storm. Daniel chuckled. Next time, let's keep things simple. Michael sighed. Let's make sure there isn't a next time. Richard looked at them, pride in his tired eyes. No promises. The Carters walked into the night, their family intact. The battle wasn't over, but for now, they had won their freedom. And sometimes, in a world of power and deception, that was enough. The Carter family walked away from the chaos, but their story proves one thing: powerful secrets never stay buried forever. What do you think will happen next? Will Vanguard return? Will Richard's past come back to haunt them? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And before you go, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. If you love this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more thrilling stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss a twist. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.